So today I'm going to talk about basic consumer theory for the market of two goods. So we're going to go over what happens to the prices, what curves are being shifted, what are the effects called, and is it a normal or inferior good? In this two good market, I'm gonna have an X and Y axis. Okay, on the horizontal axis is good X, and the vertical axis is good Y. For this consumer Bob, he has a particular budget constraint, and this is going to look something like this. All right. So the way we can kind of represent this budget constraint is, well, notice how it's downward sloping, right? So I'll get to that in a minute. But using this linear equation, we're going to call it M equals the price of good X times the good itself plus the price of good Y times the good itself, Y. Okay. Now, if we rearrange this to kind of represent this graph, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve for this in terms of Y. So this is going to be Y equals negative px times the good x plus m. And then of course we have to divide it by, we have to divide py all the way through it. Okay. Now, notice here that we have our slope and we have our intercept. So right here, this is going to be our price ratio, and it's going in the negative direction. All right. That's our intercept. That's our vertical intercept. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about price. So in this particular market, let's say for whatever reason, the price of good X goes up, all right? We don't know why yet, but we're just gonna just say the price goes up for whatever reason. It could be tax, it could be, I don't know, inflation, anything. Well, what that means is that's actually gonna affect our price ratio, what I have circled in green, and it's going to make the budget line more negative. So because that goes more negative, the slope is going to actually, the negative slope is going to increase, or I should say the slope is going to get more negative. So what this is actually a pivot from our original budget line to our new budget line. So I'm going to call our original budget line M0 and our new budget line M1. Okay. So what's going on here? So now let's talk about consumer theory a little bit. So at the original budget line, everything contained in here is the budget set that this consumer has. So that's like everything that Bob can afford. But now it's here. All right. So we'll go over that in a second. But just know that for our original budget set, we the optimal level of consuming good X and good Y would be, in the highest utility level it can reach would be like, I don't know, something like this. And we'll call this point A. Notice how now our optimal utility level, or sorry, our optimal combination of good X and good Y, so our optimal bundle can only reach this utility level. Okay. And we're going to call this point B. So A is some combination of X and Y, B is some combination of X and Y. This may not actually happen in real life, but let's say Bob wanted to compensate for this effect. So basically, effectively what happened is his income was lowered from this level to this level, so to speak. So if he wanted to compensate for that, one thing he can do is he can actually increase his income. Now, he can do that, but to describe what this line would look like, this line is going to look almost identical to M1, except it's going to be shifted in this direction. The reason why that it's going to look identical is because the slope is going to be exactly the same. The reason the slope is going to be exactly the same is because Bob has no control over the price of the market. So it's still going to have the same slope, but the intercepts are going to be different and the position of it's going to be different. Okay, let's draw this line here. Okay, so I redrew the utility curves because there's something I want to illustrate here. All right, so this blue line, this is a new line that I drew out, and what this is trying to say is that in order to compensate um, for Bob's in order for Bob to compensate for his income being lowered, in order for him to reach the original levels of utility that he was at before, he would have to increase his income. This line would have the same exact slope as M1, um, and the reason is because he can't actually control the market price, and in this case, the market price for good X is if you look at this price ratio right here, it is negative, meaning it has a negative slope. So anyway, so what you'd have to do is you have to find this line that is this, or you'd have to find this graph that has the same slope as M1 and move it all the way to the original utility level. Once it touches that original utility level, it's going to have a point that's tangent, and I colored it in purple, and I'm going to call this point E star. So at this point, um, this would be his optimal combination of good X and good Y, his optimal bundle, and it would be tangent to the original utility level. I'll call it U0, and um, and in this hypothetical situation, he would be getting the same levels of utility and satisfaction as before, but of course he would have to increase his income. Now I'm going to draw a line that kind of goes right in the middle here to kind of bring this all home. I want to show you what the movement from point A to point B, that whole change in X, okay, is actually called something. It's called the total effect. I'm just going to call it TE. For let's say we wanted to describe the movement from point A to point E, right? What's actually going along here is we're on the same exact utility curve, right? So utility is actually fixed. The only thing that is changing in this case would be the price. Now we saw that the price went up, right? So, but only the price of good X. We're not actually changing any other prices for any other goods. Now, this movement, I'll draw it out here, okay? This movement from here to here, from A to E, looks like to get from here to E, we had to give up some amount of X to get some amount of Y. So we gave up some X to gain some Y. All right, so you can think of that as like we actually substituted some goods for other goods. All right, and that's actually the substitution effect. Now, if we want to kind of describe how we got from point E to point B, all right, that wouldn't be a movement. That would not be any movement along any utility curves. Actually, what that would be is that would be a shift in this blue line that I drew. I'm going to call that M2. All right, this hypothetical uh, budget constraint we created, we would actually the shift from there back to here to where it's tangent, like somewhere along here. If we were to describe that, we would call that the income effect. And the reason why we call that the income effect is we are actually changing his income levels. We're not changing any of the prices in this case. So with the substitution effect, we were changing only the price of good X, but in the income effect, we were changing the price. We were changing only the income level Y. So um, that'd be the income effect. Now, to drive this point home, the total effect equals the income effect plus the substitution effect. All right. All right. So one important distinction I'd like to make is you might have noticed that the substitution effect and the income effect are going in the same direction. I'll come back to that here in a second. But Notice, let's see, what was my last question? Okay, is the good normal or inferior? All right, so let's talk about a normal good versus an inferior good. Okay, so for normal, the quantity demanded increases if your income increases. Okay, the quantity demanded decreases if your income decreases. All right. So one thing that could be a normal good, like food, I don't know, like a luxury item, like a food, like a caviar, steak, lobster, wine, whatever. The more your income increases, the more of that you consume. For an inferior good, it'd be like the quantity demanded increases when your income decreases. So think of like, rice, top ramen, plain spaghetti, macaroni and cheese, Kroger. All right. So let's think about this. Big picture. The market price increased. That kind of actually lowered the purchasing power of Bob because of the increase in market price. Well, how we can view this is that starting off at point A, if we draw it out this line here, we have x1, all right? And to describe the shift from point A to point B, now we have x2. And so basically the quantity of good X consumed decreased as a result of the market price increasing, which effectively decreased his income. What does that sound like? Let's see, uh, quantity demanded decreased because income decreased. So does that sound like an inferior good or a normal good? Well, it's a normal good in this case. So that's actually a roundabout way of saying that the substitution effect and the income effect go in the same direction for a normal good.